he wanted to do well and help people around the world who were in oppressed systems and that were not the greatest beneficiaries of what the world had to offer. And so he was very educated, he had been military trained. And so a lot of his actions and decisions came out of his military training, and so it's like, okay, so this particular action is okay when it's used for American military benefits, but when it's used for a different purpose, then now it's bad. If when you attack established systems, even if it's for a greater good, or you feel like it's for a greater good, then one perspective will say, oh no, this is bad because it's destroying our normal way of life. It's removing our protections. But for another person, it's like, but we need to remove your protections, or we need to highlight that something needs to change. There's a benefit that you have what it takes to, make a major difference in the world for the lives of people around the world, but you want to be selfish and stay in this cocoon forever. And so it was kind of like Killmonger in his own way broke through that mindset and that mentality to bring Wakanda out of its cocoon to possibly blossom as a butterfly. We don't know what's going to happen in the next series. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in part 2. It could, completely shift everything that I thought, but we'll see, and even like you said, at the end, it's positioned in a way to show the benefit in that conflict. But even at the beginning of the film, we go into it with this narrative of this story of Wakanda, but when we really listen to it and pay attention to that narrative, we realize it's not T'Challa's dad telling him the story of home, but it's Killmonger's dad or Eric's dad telling him the story of home because he was living in California away from his dad's birthplace. He was the only true African-American character in this film. So, with his dad being a direct African descendant, his mom being American, Black lady, he's grew up in California. So he was disconnected. So he was the only one that needed this story to be told to him. T'Challa didn't need the story because T'Challa was living in that story. And so, it's kind of this positionality and this complexity that Coogler and the other writers and directors build into this story that, like you said, builds a very complex framework if we really take the time to unpack it and look at how these worlds emerge.
Yeah, I mean, by adding the historical and the cultural impact to Killmonger, it showed, I mean, there was almost, I don't know, I can't tell if this is my own idea or if I'm just influenced by your paper, that goodness almost feels like a luxury in the film, where there was a part of me that was thinking that being moral and being good is because there was in Wakanda, there was this, that was the avenue, that was the inspiration. And I was so excited by seeing all of the female characters in there and playing equal roles. And then you point out in your essay that is something that was lacking in Killmonger's life. And so I'm starting to think that because he didn't have the luxury of having this space, that his moral decisions were far more complicated. And I mean, as you say, as a Black man, I was thinking when I first saw him come on the screen, his entire posture, I just thought, this is so American. That was the first thing that I thought of. But of course, you have the layer here of, let me see, this idea of man versus social responsibility. And I'm so glad that you're writing this because it really gave so much more context to, when I'm looking at him saying he has such an American posture, but it's so important to pay attention to the Black American experience to understand that layer of his character.
Yeah, and in that first frame of him, like I talked about this when I gave a presentation on this, I think that it's very interesting to point out that when I first saw him in that museum, he looked like he could be a friend of mine. He could be one of my cousins. He could look like somebody I went to college with. He looks like he could be one of my students, one of my former students. And so, he wasn't, to me, he wasn't threatening. To me, he wasn't intimidating. To me, he just looked like another guy that could be at my Thanksgiving dinner table. And then he was so smart, his intelligence was the first thing that came forth. And so it's that conversation of, are you threatened by my presence, my intelligence, my being? Now he did, of course, stage a rivalry, but it was still brilliantly staged. But, it's still kind of that thing of, what is it about me that threatens you, that causes fear for you?